I'm Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Thank
Hi.
you all for coming. So, a frequent question to me is, are you a pour painter? And although it would be easy just to say yes, I don't often, because I don't just do pours. If you go to YouTube, you can put in pour painting and you can see a plethora of all different levels and styles of pour painting. But most of those, you will notice, are kind of a one and done event. And there's lots of varying quality of craft in those videos as well. There are a few out there that have been doing it for 3 or 4 years now, and their imagery and palette and composition is pleasing, but I'm not sure the bulk of them out there are. Is a polite way to say that. Anyway, I start by telling a story underneath my painting. So I start, this one that already has 2 layers on it, and then I will make myself cover that up. So if you look at this one, you can see there's some of the underpainting shows through. And I use that to kind of set the tone. So I try and decide what my story is going to be about. As a lifelong water child and boat captain, most of my stories are about the water. Sometimes there'll be an impact from something current that's happening, or maybe something I learned about working right now on a piece that's about the George's Valentine, which wrecked in front of the House of Refuge in 1904 in a storm. And the Anastasia rock there is dark brown, and the beautiful clear turquoise water, when it crashes on it, looks just so. And because I've started docentting at the House of Refuge, this new story kind of came about from that. It's about 4 by 6 foot canvas, and it's been in process for about a month now, because I do a lot of different layers. So I pre-painted these yesterday so I could have a start and I'll do 2 different kinds of pours today. I will do one which is more typical of what you see on YouTube, with a white and other colors layered. And then the other I will do with the pouring medium and just adding some color and blowing it out. Any of you who have used the restroom have seen the piece on the wall that was done by Sue Klon, and she will float paint in her resin and blow it out, and it gives this wonderful frothy water effect. So typically I like to talk about the materials first. I encourage using quality paint because of the archival and UV and intensity of the pigments. I mix this with either Floetrol or the golden pouring medium, or a mix of both. I feel like this dries clearer than so I want sort of a misty effect. I will use more of the golden. And then I use some water, and my ratios are typically 50% paint and then 40% pouring medium and 10% water. And I mix them in containers. So I noticed this morning that I was low on Prussian blue. The other thing
You mix the colors ahead of time?
yes. And I try not to use paint straight, just one color. I like to add a little variance to it before I put it on, because I once had a museum curator look at my work and go, "You're painting straight out of the tube." Like, okay. And that was a problem.
That's a no-no.
Because I enjoy, even when I'm doing brushwork, I enjoy mixing it on the canvas,
Yeah.
but I've tried to train myself to do some pre-mixing ahead of time. So,
So who will do, sell all that stuff?
Neil over at Stewart Supply sells everything but this. This you get at the hardware store,
Oh,
Home Depot.
in the paint department?
Yes. And
Okay.
unlike a lot of the videos you would see on YouTube, I never add silicone oil or anything that could, over time, either cause the paint to come off or yellow or do things that we don't know what it's gonna do. I had a lady contact me recently. She had found me, not stalked me, but found me. And she sent me a photo of a painting from 1983 that I did. And it was still holding up really well.
Wow,
So,
that's good.
yeah.
Good to know.
And she was like, "Are you the artist?" Yes, I am. Where'd you find that? Anyway, so I use good quality paint. Occasionally, because I use on my big pieces, like the one I talked about a few minutes ago that's 4 feet by 6 feet, I've done one as big as 7 by 7 feet. I will buy a real high quality white latex and use that for my whites sometimes. It depends. One of the reasons I like to do that is because of the way the alchemy works between that and the golden. The white will reveal the underpainting. So it'll kind of give an interesting effect, like you see here, where it kind of pulls apart and gives a bit of the underpainting. As far as tools, I use brushes, I use palette knives, I use tongue depressors, I use a hair dryer, I use combs, forks, chopsticks. One of my favorite tools that I realized I didn't throw in the tub today is an icing spatula, a big one. When I'm working on the super big canvases, I often will attach the tools to the tubes that you have inside wrapping paper. So I also have to stand on scaffolding and to get to the middle.
I was wondering how you do something that big, because it's not this way.
Well, I start with the vertical to do the underpainting.
Yeah.
And then I lay them down to do the liquid part. And then I put them back up to do the final touches, which you may or may not ever notice in them. But I actually do go back with fine brushes and do some enhancements, if you will. So I am not like the YouTubers in that way, that I do lots of layers and I do some fine tuning after the fact. I'm not a one and done kind of girl. Also important, rags, drop cloths. I will try not to get paint on too raw.
Maybe we shouldn't have sat in front row.
So when I'm mixing the paint and deciding what I want my palette to be, viscosity plays a big part of it. The thinner the paint, the less control I have and the less dominant that color is going to be. So I usually will have the thicker paint be the dominant colors and the thinner paint be more of a mixing and moving medium. There are lots of different kinds of pours. There's a puddle pour, there's a dirty pour, we'll do one of those. There's also you can find all kinds of fun toys at the hardware store. So on a big one, I have one of these that's this big. I'll just pour different colors and then I'll drag it. I'll have the canvas have a color down already that's wet, so it slides. And some somebody came up with one of these. You can get them in different sizes, with different numbers of slots. You can put the same color in all the slots and just layer different colors in it, or you can put a different color in
Is that
each
plastic?
slot. Yes, it's kind of a plastic. I'm wondering if they didn't make it in a plastic printer. I don't know. There's also other kinds of mediums. There's glazing liquid. One of the new toys that I've been playing a lot with is airbrush medium made by Gold. You mix that with the color and it comes out like watercolor. It's very thin. I don't know if it'll get accepted in the All Florida show, but I actually have a big piece that I did that way with different layers of translucent. Because I also spent over 25 years doing nothing but watercolor in back when. So I enjoy that liquid and translucentness. So playing with that on canvas is fun. Pitfalls are getting muddy colors. I recommend if you want to try this at home, don't use more than 3 colors at a time, plus your white. I'm gonna actually do one of these with just white, orange, yellow, and red, and blue. So you can see that in a lot of the pieces I do, I don't use more colors than that, but it makes the colors. I can end up with pinks and greens and a whole rainbow. One of the things I noticed on a lot of the YouTube videos, some of those people have no sense of color. Their stuff comes out and it's hideous. Some of them are beautiful, but some are not. It's good to have a sort of a plan after you have kind of gotten comfortable with the media and the tools. When I taught watercolor and when I taught computer painting, digital work, I recommend, and I do it here too, that you play with the materials without an intended outcome first, so you get comfortable with what you're doing before you try and paint a painting. So, without further ado, I'm going to do the translucent one first. Well, we'll just do it a different way. So this will dry fairly clear, maybe a little hazy.
And what was in the bigger bottle, the airbrush medium?
This is actually, I didn't bring any airbrush medium, I don't think, with me. Oh, there's a little bit. This is a regular pouring medium.
Okay.
We'll use a little of this too.
Do you need power? Is that what you're
I-
doing?
That's,
Okay.
and I don't know if it's because the plug is painted in the. I should have checked it. It might need a hammer. But for this size, I can probably just get away with what I'm doing with my mouth. So you can see how I'm getting the wave effect, like you would when water comes in and comes to your toes at the edge of the beach. I actually have a big painting at home that is 7 feet tall, and that's all it's about, is those
Well,
little
yeah.
wavelets that come and
Yeah.
break at your
Yeah.
toes,
Yeah.
and it's painted from the point of view of a 4-year-old. Looking up at the waves coming in. So. Let's get to it. If you all want to pass these around while I'm talking, this has got 3 or 4 layers on it. This is very similar to what the first 2 layers look like. So this had a glaze on it, light blue, and then the first pour. The other thing I'll warn you about is some of these paints get stinky. Bless you.
Thank you.
So this is gonna be a dirty pour.
And what's that, just regular White House paint, or is that?
It's a mix of white, exterior, high-grade latex, and Floetrol, and some golden medium, and some water. Just because I go through gallons at a time.
Try it again, Jane, your hair dryer.
Oh, thank you. It might be this.
Yeah, the grounding thing on there.
It could just, do you want to just go directly into this maybe? Yeah. It just might be time for a new one. Okay. Thank you, Tara.
Sure, no worries.
Nope, sorry. So the idea with the hair dryer is the same thing with, if I'm doing a fine, nice little area, I will use a straw. If I'm working on a 7-footer, I might have a indoor-outdoor vac instead. My husband came home and he thought it would be a great idea to let me use the Festool, which is a real fancy vacuum they use on boats when they're sanding. And then he saw me working and decided maybe that wasn't such a good idea because he didn't want my paint all over his fancy tool. Anyway, these things happen.
Jane, try it one more time, please.
Okay.
No, never mind.
Thank you. I have a feeling it's had one too many coats of paint on it.
Is that dry quickly, or does it take like a day, or?
When I do the big ones, typically the underpainting dries in a day, but then when I get to the big pours, this will probably dry in a day or two, but the amount of paint, like that one probably took over a week in between layers. It depends on how generous I am with the paint.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll do a second layer before the first one's dried, just because I want to
See what happens.
monopolize the wetness that I've got.
I see.
But, so when you read about flip cup, it's basically a dirty pour, but instead of, or we can just do it. So a dirty pour would have been just me pouring that out.
So you don't need a base underneath that, huh?
You can,
Uh-huh. You want it to move faster, is that why you do it, to get it
Yes.
to flow better?
yes. I don't have to, because I do the underpainting, I may or may not cover, so a lot of the ones you see on your videos,
white.
they are on white, they have they do a whole white wetness, and that's so that the paint moves easier.
Oh,
So, the reason some of those people add things like silicone and oil and those things that I won't, is to get this,
cells.
the cells, the bubbling. But I have found, especially if you use a mix of the Floetrol and the golden and the latex and the fancy paints, that you get that alchemy happening. You get the fun pulls away without having to diminish the archival quality of the materials you're using. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
So then you can just let it go, or you can move it around, or you can use a hairdryer if you haven't ruined yours.
It does move quite slow, does it?
Yeah, so if I had a wet underpainting, it would have moved faster, but
Yeah, that's okay.
and the way you do things will evolve. So when I started, did I do all wet underpainting? Absolutely. But because I don't want to be like anybody else,
Yeah.
I have.
Wow, that was
Wow,
great.
hold it there, Jean, hold it there for a second.
Wow,
You realize it's moving.
Yeah, it's really.
that looks fab.
Yeah, really, really great.
Because some of there's water, so it makes these whole cells. Do you
So
ever use a torch or a heat gun?
I have one, but I don't use it very often.
You don't find it necessary?
No, I like what happens organically,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean that's right or wrong
Right.
or anything. And like I say, you find what is your favorite way of working,
Yeah.
and look what happened.
You know,
How
I was
fun is
wa-
that?
I was watching that happen, I thought, okay, let's see what it does.
Yeah, why not?
Ah, waste not, want not.
Well, I am Scottish, you know.
Oh, look at that.
So, then,
It does.
then there are other things you can do. I have,
What's that, water?
that's water. And I have one that's a big, high-powered squirter, and I didn't bring it on purpose, because I know that if I got paint on the walls, those two would have my head. But I can actually shoot at the painting and then manipulate as if I were using a brush, but
Yeah.
I'm using a squirt gun. That's, it's water. Who doesn't love water? And I often will have like a big canvas, I have a easel outside in the garage that does vertical or horizontal. So I'll have one going out there and one going on the foosball table box that my husband built me at the same time. And then I'll wish I had this set up because, you know, I just want to keep going.
It's so interesting what's happening with that stuff.
And the thicker the paint, the more change will occur in the drying process. So, like all these little pull-aways, and also if your platform isn't perfectly level, you could come back the next morning and there could have been a little bit of a shift. Sometimes I'll do that on purpose. I've gotten better about leveling the easel out in the garage doesn't level easily, but, so I have to consciously make that happen when I get it just the way I want it. So, one of the fun things about having the underpainting is you can also pull away and get some of that showing up. But that is, in a nutshell, the basis of how, now imagine going through this with multiple layers, and some of them will have more of the transparent or translucent gel, so that you can come back and keep layering on top of each
So,
other.
when this is thoroughly dry, then you do the second layer?
Yeah, I may, or I may love it the way it is.
Uh-huh.
It depends on how complex it's gonna be.
Yeah.
But there's no rules. That's why it suits me so well.
That's why
So there's nothing to keep me from doing another layer or scraping part of this layer off or pouring a transparent layer with just some lacing of white or another color in it. And then coming back when it's all done and putting it on the easel and painting on it with a brush, whether it's dots or,
If you do translucent and then you put more on top, will you get like a floating effect?
yes.
If you paint on top, what you were just saying, is that acrylic paint?
Yes,
Regular acrylic paint, you just go in?
Yes.
You don't have all this stuff in it? Or is it just the paint from the
it
tube?
depends on what I'm trying to achieve. Typically, when I go in for the detail,
Mhm.
it's paint and
And a brush.
palette.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
As a matter of fact, I almost grabbed my palette, because I was using it yesterday, but I didn't. I just got tired of loading the car. I have a cart that I wheel from the studio to the garage for that part of the studio, that has all kinds of more colors and mixes and more different kinds of medium. This is satin glazing, so it is not as thin as the airbrush, but it's not as thick as the pouring. And so, get something out. So that will make a design in the paint, but it will be dry clear.
Yeah.
So, you can use that to further your design. Obviously, for this purpose, I'm not getting too particular about how what I'm doing, but
So that white will, that you just squirted on.
that will dry clear, yes. And it may make little furrows in the existing paint that's on the canvas so that you might see the underpainting underneath.
Is this white stuff that's in that one gonna dry clear too, or is that white paint?
That's white paint.
That's white paint.
Yeah. So this has some really beautiful stuff happening, in that.
And every time it all levels,
I don't
Does it
like
ever
level, you know.
okay, so you
I-
don't find ridges.
Yeah, and you will see that on the YouTube videos, they're all about it being all smooth and I am not. When I did digital art, my biggest problem with computer art is that no matter how you print it out, it comes out flat.
Yeah.
And so I once did a 6-foot-long canvas printed out from a piece I designed on the computer, and I hated it so much. I cut it in half, sewed it back together in the middle, so you have this seam,
Yeah.
and then I wrapped a transparent piece of film around part of it that I had scribed a letter that my father had written my mother in 1946. And the handwriting back then was amazing, even for men. It was just stunning. So, anyway, I don't like smooth. I like
No, texture.
bumpy and life just isn't smooth and
That's for sure.
it's bumpy, it's messy, and it's better when there are no rules. Any other questions? 30 minutes on the dime.
Wow. You can keep going if you like. Nobody,
Now, will they continue to travel, these two, as they sit there?
Because they are not perfectly level, yes, and so I probably will continue to turn them so they don't do too
Can I
much.
take a picture?
oh, yeah.
You can take it, yeah. And sometimes I use that, and sometimes I try to get them where they're level so that, it depends on what I'm trying to achieve.
I like the idea of leaving some ridges and bumps, because they're, like you said, all about smooth, which is why I think a lot of them use the heat gun to get those, to pop those bubbles. Do you leave bubbles in?
I've never had a bubble stay. If I
Maybe
see
they
a
should-
bubble, I will,
Okay.
I'll do something to it.
Uh-huh.
But I typically don't have that issue, and that may be a product of the stuff that they're adding to that paint that they shouldn't be. That diminishes the archivalness.
Uh-huh.
Because, you know, of course I'm gonna live another 100 years, and someone's gonna come back and go, this turned yellow, or crap, fell off, the paint fell off again.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Oh, my
Jane, you might be too modest to mention this, but I would really like it if you would talk about those beautiful scarves.
Oh, yeah.
So this is
Oh.
what her,
Dot, will you come assist?
I will, by
I
God.
promise not to touch you. So, I had the idea one day that, gee, some of my paintings might lend themselves to,
And if you could, well, you should come and feel these too, because they are the softest,
yeah, they're
most.
beautiful.
Can I pass one around?
of course you can. You can.
They are just magnificent.
So, we have 5, there's these
Aren't they
2,
beautiful?
and there's 3 more different ones in the boutique. If you all haven't been to the
So
boutique.
somebody you had somebody do this from one of your images?
Yes, there is a company out there, and this company that does it, this is
Really
a,
magnificent.
they call it a modal scarf, but it's made out of beechwood fiber. And I love the way it holds the color. The same company does cashmere and
And there's
wool
more in the boutique.
and silk, but I like the way it comes out on this fiber the
I'd like
best.
to ask her, I'm not
Are they
sure.
laundered or dry cleaned, or it's beautiful fabric?
I don't know why you couldn't
I
hand
have
wash
hand
that.
washed
Oh, yeah.
mine, but,
I don't know why you couldn't hand wash that.
it's, I can't remember what, I can look up what the
You know what, I would put
instructions
it,
are.
you know what, I would put it in a lingerie bag and put it in the machine, I bet.
Just beautiful.
But the company that does that, they employ women in countries where they are at risk and help them
That would look lovely on your tongue.
financially to lift them up in their respective areas. Which is better than China.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
And Jane, what, they're 300 each?
No.
No, but now they're gonna think it's a deal. Tell them what they are, Jane.
75.
Smart.
I don't know who's better, you or your husband is selling. I think I managed to not get any paint on the other one.
Yeah.
They really are magnificent. I just love them, I know.
It's a little shawl and stuff, it's not gonna be too heavy.
So, other paints that I might use could be, and sometimes I'll come in at the end and add it, and sometimes I'll do it in the beginning, but metallics. You don't wanna overuse that, or at least I don't, it's obvious. That too much could be too much.
Is there such a thing as overuse?
Not in this. There was something recently, and I can't remember now what it was, I think it might have been, it was ornaments. I made ornaments, kind of with this technique, and then sprayed them with the clear crackle.
How could you do something real?
It's even more messy.
So you're not dipping?
No,
No,
and
okay.
I have, and one year, my son and I felt the need to give away 130 gifts. So we bought the little clear
Yes.
ornaments, and we did the marbleizing
Oh,
paint,
okay.
and dipped them and hung them in the rafters to dry. But I've tried both the plastic balls and just pouring over them, or the glass balls and using the paint, doing it carefully on the inside,
Oh,
which takes a lot more thought, because you have to think backwards. But I like those a lot better,
okay.
is where you do, the outside, to me, became muddy very easily. And that is, for any of you trying at home, just plan on that being a problem in the early stages of your experiments, and don't get discouraged. You can paint over it.
This is what Joan has been doing.
Jane, what's the largest painting you've done in this process?
7 foot by 7 foot.
Holy crap.
I the paint, that was for the tech center in Jensen Beach, across the street from Tony Roma's on Pineapple Circle. But 5 foot by 7 foot is not uncommon for me these days. And actually, the 6 paintings I took up, or sent up to the Hampton shows, was 17,122 square inches of painting.
Oh, my.
The smallest of which was 49 by 34, and the biggest of which was 5 feet by 7 feet.
Do you like working larger than smaller?
You know, once you get over the fear of that amount of real estate, it actually is fun. And so when the Guild Complex had the little tiny miniatures,
right.
and so did Fort Pierce did a miniature show as well. I remember calling Barb for moral support to, how in the hell am I gonna go from 7 feet down to
1 inch.
5 inches? And she said, cut out a bunch of cardboard and just practice. And I did, and then it became fun again.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah,
the
so
fear of the white paper, fear of the white canvas, that's very real. The fear of covering up an underpainting you really like is, I had to call, obviously Barb's my go-to for this, when I had to paint the next couple layers on this one after doing the underpainting looked like a well-aged dock. It was just, or bulkhead, similar to the floor, but with a little more color. And I really liked it, and I was like, but that was not what I was doing. I was planning this, so I had to put on my big girl panties and go at it.
Yeah, it looks like there's a line around that the way to go.
Yeah. If those were dry, either one of them, and you decided there was a section that you just didn't like, could you do another pour just over a particular section?
Yep.
And it would,
It will have another layer.
Uh-huh.
And so I was talking about the 7 foot piece I have at home that is from the little boy's point of view, and it's layer, I would do a layer, just a section, and do the white and the dark to create that little wavelet coming to your toes, and then I would move up the canvas and do the next. So as I worked up the canvas, there was, the one closest to the bottom is a single layer on top of the underpainting, whereas the ones farther up the painting are layer on layer on layer.
so you actually can see a difference in depth as it moves.
Yes, because my husband wanted it that way.
Okay.
I was like, really? This isn't complicated enough? The 7 foot painting, you want it layered like it would be at the beach? Okay, sure. And I think some of Sue's are like that.
Yeah.
She's, Sue Kwan, who did the stingrays here, and the piece in the
Yeah, I think
bathroom I
this
referred
one,
to, and
yeah.
then the beach piece.
Yeah.
She has gotten so much control over her media and how she does these.
The layering, yeah.
There are other people out there doing it, but I think hers are some of the best of that.
What is that medium that she's got?
She's using acrylic and then she puts resin on it. And she also, she's so good at the resin that we asked her to do this counter for us too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's canvas to start with?
I think so, yeah. She also does those things on cutting boards and the boutique, which if you have time, everybody check out the boutique, because
You're actually not allowed to leave until you go in there. It's kind of the rule.
so,
That's what
and as you want to, if you want to, I would come up and see some of the alchemy that is occurring between the three different types of material that I use. It's getting very lacy.
Oops.
Now, if my hair dryer were working, I could expand these areas out with, and I should have brought a straw. We don't have any straws here, do we?
Just the one I'm using.
Oh, no.
Hello there.
You probably don't want me in my hair.
Isn't that gorgeous? We were talking about you.
Did you hear your name?
Once or twice. But it was nice.
It was all good things.
so good.
Thank you.
Right? Maybe I can roll up a piece of paper.
Yeah, because we didn't know she was here behind her.
Very cool.
How are you feeling?
Very exhausted.
Should I turn this? Booch.
Jane, is it set too much already, or just?
There we go. Oh, thank you.
Oh, look at that. How cool is that?
And this is why my hair is up.
Oh, wait a minute, Jane. Let me get in there. Let me get in there, and then we'll finish this up.
When you use a hairdryer, some of them you almost can make something that looks
Wow,
like
very
a
neat.
blossom.
That's just wonderful.
That's amazing, yeah.
I think it makes you appreciate the process more, or the end product.
Yeah,
You
for
see
sure.
the process.
Yeah, the process.
It's complex.
Yeah.
And
When
although
you're
it's
choosing
complex,
your
there's a lot of
colors,
freedom in it.
Do you try to choose, do you think about the color wheel, do you think about colors that go together? As you see some on YouTube, they look like Halloween decorations.
Oh, God, some of it is
A lot
just
of
horrible.
neon
That's
and
what I'm
black
saying.
and
You
orange
really
and
want to
blue.
think out your colors, and less is more. I don't know whether it's good advice to even start with maybe black and white first, just to get a feel, or you can use, this time I used the orange and red, but
And then certainly be
don't
aware that
even
if
see
you have
the
a blue
red
and a
anymore.
yellow, you're gonna get green in it. and things
yeah,
like that.
depending on how thinly they are mixed. The
Uh-huh.
thicker they are, the less they're going to mix and make a third. So I usually typically will mix some thicker that I want to be dominant and some thinner that I don't mind or plan on them mixing and creating a new color.
Jane, what is your formula? How much paint, how much Floetrol, how much water?
So it's approximately 50% good quality tube paint,
Tube paint, okay.
40% of mixing medium, which can be, I've started using both Floetrol and the Golden. Sometimes-
Golden's very expensive, isn't it? Compared to
No, I
Floetrol?
don't.
Oh, okay.
It's like
Anything
when
that says
you go to the
Golden on
grocery
it.
store, you want raspberries. You
Okay.
just don't look.
Okay,
Yes, this is, I'm sure, a lot cheaper.
okay.
And it's thinner, and it dries clearer. So this is going to, when it dries, this stuff will have a bit of a milky look to it. I have a painting I did, and was the first time I used a lot of that. And I named the painting Sea Fog, because
Everything-
that's what it looked like. But you were asking how I choose my colors. Yeah, let me finish answering her question, I'll come back to yours.
So it's-
So I do 10% water, 40% of this, and then 50% color.
Okay.
If I'm trying to, that's kind of a base equation.
Mhm.
And some of the people on YouTube actually weigh or measure.
Right.
I have a ability for spatial, I'm good with spatial things, so I can tell you what will
Estimate.
fit into a jar.
Okay.
Or so I don't measure, because that's just too confining for me. I
What's the-
started out, but I just hated it.
Why do you do the underpainting? So, because most of the pours are without the underpainting.
Because I don't, if I like what's happening, I don't want to corrupt it just so I can cover my edges. And also, I tell a little bit of a secret story in the underpainting. It's part of my process, because my pieces are stories.
Okay.
So recently I was showing a piece called Undertow that I painted while my son had COVID. And when he was young, he had lung damage. So I was terrified, and I felt so out of control. And so I did fairly elaborate underpainting, and then did the overpainting, because it was such an important story that was so close to me. And I wanted the freedom of the overpainting to capture that power of the water sucking you out into the ocean and you feeling powerless. So it depends on what the story is that I'm telling, how evolved the underpainting is. This will be a fairly evolved piece that seems to be the direction I'm going. I didn't always do a colorful underpainting. Sometimes I would just do the white, or then I started tinting the white, and then I was enjoying using a brush again. So I just said, what the heck, I'll just keep painting until I'm happy with it. But the other part of the underpainting is it kind of helps me focus on what my palette's gonna be, which comes back to your question. So the piece facing the window in the front has a very, almost an indigo side that kind of blends into a yellow. These, you noticed, I'm kind of pushing myself. I've been staring at Andrew Wyeth paintings a lot lately. So my palette's kind of trying to get more of an organic feel. Of course, I'm not gonna leave out the blue. That I have painted a few paintings without blue, but that was when I was crossing Lake Okeechobee a lot on boat deliveries, and everything was green and red. So those were green and red. But some pieces are a beautiful day at the beaches off of Jupiter. I mean, the crystal clear water, perfect wave, gentle wave pattern, white sand, everything's gorgeous. But a lot of my pieces are now getting to have a little bit more, it's like an onion. And as you peel it away, with my psyche, the stories are, well, let's just say I sailed through my first hurricane at age 13, so if I try and paint a painting of the Gulf of Mexico, I've got a lot of angry stories to paint before I'm gonna get to that pretty placid beach, Juno Beach. So one of the things I noticed when I, early on years ago, started watching the YouTube videos was the hideous colors. And as a person who started traditionally in the 70s doing strictly black and white drawing and not even attempting paint or color until I had accomplished that. And then I moved to formal portraiture and mixing of skin tones and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I was at California Institute of the Arts and I was broke, and the guy who ran the art supply store at the school gave me some paper and some chalk. And I went and got gravel and wet it and used a magnifying glass for my inspiration and made these big colorful drawings, and to where I trusted myself with color. And so, look, the hardest thing in the world is making sure I don't have greens that yell at each other. You can use a lot more blues together than although not all of them go well together, but green is the color that's just, yeah, you can have two greens and they just be at war with each other. So trying to be thoughtful about the color wheel and about color theory, but, and still tell the story that I want to tell. But sometimes it's fun to just be playful and to add more red. I will take a commission on occasion, strictly because I know that I'm going to have to push my comfort zone of color. So when the guy took the 17,000 square inches of painting to the Hamptons, one of the pieces had a lot of red in it and yellow. And he was like, wow, I want to take that just because it's such a different palette than the others. So,
You're rude.
yes.
Don't you see it?
Yeah. So I was trying to paint a painting for a friend that wanted the entrance to Galveston Island in Texas, which is called Bolivar Road. And I was going to paint it in this very strong red, blue, and gold palette. And it turned out very much more ultramarine blue and turquoise with some splashes of red and yellow in it. And it was more about the angry Gulf of Mexico than it was about the Bolivar Road entrance. And that's when I realized that some days I control the paint and some days the paint controls me. And that was a story. I had so many scary stories from my time sailing on that body of water that it just wasn't going to allow me to paint. I have to get some of those stories out first before I can do what I want.
When you were talking earlier about exterior paint, why exterior versus interior, and why high quality versus any quality?
In my early training, it was all about the quality of the materials, the UV fastness of the pigment. That's the UV fastness and lifespan of the paint talks to the archivalness of the piece.
Paints are rated that way?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you go to the store and you see a cheap tube of paint and then you see an expensive tube of paint, chances are the expensive is called the professional grade and the cheaper are the student grade. And that is a logical progression for a student that's learning to use the less expensive materials, and then when they want to create work to sell that should last as long as the Mona Lisa, then they should use the quality materials. So the same with the exterior paint is made to withstand longer than
Matte,
interior.
gloss, what?
Matte. I'm not a shiny person.
Okay.
For two reasons. One is I just am not. I mean, look at me. Two, we have a saying where I come from, boat hair, don't care. But the other part of it is, especially with my bigger pieces, they're going in homes with giant walls of windows. And the shiny is, if you look around the room, the pieces you see the easiest that maintain the detail from a distance are the ones that are not glossy. So if you look, like from where I'm standing, I can see perfectly what is outside the window on Sue's resin. And I can see silhouettes and color on the elephant because of but I can see Charlie's piece. If my eyes were better, I could read it from here.
If you wanted to just play around and with house paint before getting all the stuff, would something
not concerned with being frugal with them, because chances are you want to cover them up at some point. Now, one thing that I have a piece like this, I love stencils. I'm terrible at stencils. It's kind of like coloring in the lines in a coloring book. But there's a Japanese print of a fish. And so sometimes when I do a little one and it's almost okay, I might take that Japanese stencil of the fish, scales, and do something with that on top, just so I don't waste it. It just depends, you know. But there's nothing wrong with if it's a complete mess. I have scraped the whole thing and started over. Or I just keep adding layers until I resolve the problem. And sometimes I do a lot of layers because I want to do a lot of layers, and sometimes I do a lot of layers because I'm trying to resolve an issue. Maybe I rushed my mixing and I had too many colors too thin, and my dominant color didn't stay dominant. Or I went through a week of this hideous Pepto-Bismol paint happening. Oh my God, what can I do to fix that? I mean, that happens. It happens to me, it happens to everybody. Except the people you see on video that do the good ones.
Okay, so Wednesday, the league floors are filthy dirty. I'm going there tomorrow, and I make no promises.
So I will tell you that we have tile floors at my house, and I get a lot of paint on the floors, even because I did have a throw like this underneath, but as messy and thick and big as my stuff is, sometimes it seeps through. It does come off tile very well.
And the grout?
Yeah.
Not so much.
Don't talk to my husband about grout.
Not like oil.
And if you're using a hairdryer or an indoor-outdoor back, know that the paint is going to be everywhere. So if there's anything important, like your husband's motorcycle, cover it. Didn't make that mistake. No.
Oh, thank you so much.
And dogs and cats that like to watch you and be right where the drip is.
Lovely cells on the dog.
Thank you all.
Thank